Welcome to the Harshe Podcast. I have a special treat today, and that is our first guest ever on our podcast. So today, Tara with Doula Trainings International is joining us. Hi, Tara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. You are actually abroad right now, correct?
I am. I've been traveling with my family, which is my husband and 3 children, for almost a year now. We went on a 4-month adventure and didn't return. So I'm still in Spain and will be coming back to the United States sometime in August.
That is awesome. I actually just got the chills. That's so cool. I mean, it's one of those stories you read about on like a travel website of a family who goes on vacation and doesn't come back. They just keep traveling and you're like, how do they do that? So that's really neat that you'll have that story to share. But you guys are planning on coming back.
We are. We were planning on coming back after 4 months and then we didn't return. And we were kind of just going month by month and not sure how long we were going to stay. But we're actually at a place now where it feels like the time is right to return. It definitely was never a plan to be forever. So We'll be going back to the United States within the next couple of months.
That is so neat. I can't wait to hear more about your time in Spain. Spain is just one of those places that you're like, yeah, I could do that. So
Absolutely. Especially as a parent, you know, the culture is so child friendly. That was a big draw for us.
Wow. That's nice. That's interesting. You mentioned that because just yesterday, and you probably had experiences like this too, because you have 3 children, right? So,
yeah, I have 3, a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Okay. So once you get past 2 kids, you start getting those comments, right? In our culture, at least. Yeah. And I was with just 3 of my children, because as everyone listening knows, we have 6 children. And I was with 3 of our children, and we were picking up our mail at our office. And we ended up in the elevator with 3 men who were in their 30s or 40s, and I don't know their situation or if they have children or not, but they made all these comments to me and to my children and in front of my children about jokes about the Brady Bunch and told me good luck with that. Now, you know me, Tara, right? You know that I was biting my tongue because I had a few comebacks for that. And then one of the gentlemen said, there's a wine store right around the corner. You know, insinuating that I needed alcohol to be a parent of multiple children. And that's when I stopped biting my tongue and said, no, this mom is sober, thanks. And just kept walking because, you know, you've mentioned you listen to the podcast. You probably know I'm a teetotaler. I no longer drink. So, but there's this thought in our culture that you have to drink alcohol or have some other vice to be able to parent children. So it's refreshing to hear that you're in a culture that is child friendly and supportive.
Absolutely. You know, I actually, there's a huge difference between American culture and Spanish culture. And by the way, like it changes depending on where you are in Europe, but it's very particular to Spain that almost the more disruptive your children are, the more welcome they are.
Really?
And as an American, that was not something I was accustomed to. And it just makes being out with your children so much more enjoyable.
Wow.
You know, you can go to a restaurant and sit there for 3 hours and your kids can run around and everyone is just smiling at you.
Wow. That's incredible.
Really been eye-opening.
You know, one of the things that Brandon and I have talked about on the podcast in some parenting episodes is that many times when you're out with your children, you're not just stressed about how your kids are behaving. You're mostly stressed about other adults judging you, right? So it's really neat to, you know, we're moving. We're moving to Spain.
Right. Well, I remember, you know, even being a new mom, and by the way, I had been a doula for 11 years by the time I gave birth to my first. And so I had helped not only people, you know, have their babies, but also breastfeed for the first time, get out of the house for the first time, all of those new parent things that feel so big. And I thought I was really, really prepared. And when I went out into the world, I was also nervous. What happens if, you know, my baby starts crying and I can't latch the baby on? And what are people going to say and think and feel? I was shocked that I also had those feelings, but it really is our culture that's giving us those messages over and over again. And so you have to figure out a way to be in your community, right? Still an active part of your community, and be a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's fascinating. I love hearing about different cultures and just how they view families and parenting and children. And it's just really neat. So thank you for sharing that. That's really neat. Speaking of culture and birth and you being a doula for so many years, we're going to get into talking about the top 5 things your doula wants you to know. I love this. When we were discussing topics to talk about, this is the one that stood out to me the most because although I'm not a certified doula, I've started and been running Birth Without Fear for 8 years now. And I've attended a few births as, a backup doula situation. And I think that this is an interesting angle to come out talking about doulas and parents and childbirth because doulas have a lot of experience and they have a lot of knowledge and education. And to talk about the things your doula wants you to know, I just think that's rad. So do you want to mention the first out of the 5 that we're going to talk about?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
So the first one is your doula wants you to know that you are the driver. This is all about you. We want a birthing person who has autonomy and choice as the key decision maker at all times. That has to be the person who is giving birth 100%. Doulas want you to come out of your birth feeling like you were in that driver's seat making the decisions, because at the end of the day, if you feel your own autonomy, if you're able to embrace that you were a part of that decision-making process, then it doesn't really matter if your birth plan was followed 100% or if you changed your mind at a certain point, because you had a say in it. And guess what? As the birthing person, you are the consumer, right? I think, especially if you're having a hospital birth, we often walk in and feel like now we do what people tell us to do.
Right.
But that's not really the case. You still have choices. Right. There was a great recent article that talked about postpartum depression and breastfeeding, a number of things, but it has such a great analogy at the end. And it said, if parenting is a journey, if mothering is the biggest road trip of our lives, then being the birthing person, you're not a vehicle, you're the driver. And that really stuck out to me. It's like, who are you going into that birth? It doesn't just disappear. And I don't know if you felt that during any of your births, but
love that.
If you're the one who's saying, yeah, that's okay that we're going to do that next. That sounds right to me. Or, yeah, I've done this long enough. I can't go on anymore.
Right.
But when you're able to make those decisions, it definitely changes your experience of the birth. And I think I would go out on a ledge and say it actually changes the way you can parent, because you're leading into that with confidence.
I agree.
And your birth is about you. It's not the doula who is working with you. There's no agenda that doula has. It's about you and your baby and no one else. No one can tell you what kind of birth is best for you. Right. You're in control and it's your choice. Your doula is not there to tell you how to birth, and no one else can make those choices better than you.
Absolutely. I love that. That actually goes beautifully hand in hand with option, support, and respect, which was a saying I started doing a few years ago in Birth Without Fear, because that's really what it's about. And for my own 6 birth experiences, and then also speaking with thousands of women online and in person, I started recognizing early on in Birth Without Fear that it wasn't about how that baby came out. When a woman was discussing how she felt about her birth experience, it was all about if she was, like you said, in charge and the driver of that experience, and feeling that she had options and that she was given information that she needed to make the choices that were best for her and her baby, and that she was respected and supported in those choices. It's very rarely about how the baby comes out of our body and enters earthside, as it is how we're treated through the process, or how we feel we had, well, like you said, the role in the birth experience. So I completely agree with that. And I think that's an incredible number one to start with, because on another note too, doesn't it kind of take a little bit of that scared feeling? I think a lot of times, at least in my experience with birth, feeling scared or feeling fearful is because I just felt out of control, or I felt that no one was listening to me. And it took me until my 4th birth for me to feel that I was the driver, as you say. And I don't want that for other birthing people. I know you don't either. And that's why we do what we do. But, it took till my fourth child to feel that way. And not feeling that way is a very scary, frustrating feeling. So it's great to have a doula on board that can help remind you and guide you that, hey, you're in charge here. This is all about you. I love that.
Yeah, I often talk to clients about, the things that the doula like says to you during labor. And that, oftentimes I'm very quiet when I'm with someone in labor anyway, but there are times when you're saying, you're doing such a good job. You can do it, all of these encouraging words. Mm-hmm. But I do kind of preface it before in our prenatals together that I'm not going to ever say something that's not true.
Right.
Because I think so often people are like, okay, you've been saying that for 3 hours.
Right.
But you want to make sure that as the doula, the words are filled with meaning. And so that birthing person knows I can trust in the moment that the information I'm getting is correct. Mm-hmm. And that this is truly the experience of those on my team that are around me. And then they can make decisions, right, based on that information or those words that you're sharing. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so number 2, you shared with me these tips beforehand, by the way. So number 2, your doula wants you to know birth can be humbling. Explain what you mean by that.
It's okay to plan for something. Matter of fact, I think birth plans are a really useful tool in not only educating yourself or having the doula help you with learning some childbirth education or taking a childbirth ed class. And then the birth plan can also be used as a tool to talk to your provider about some things that are coming up for you and what your preferences are. But we also need to be open to change because birth is unpredictable. And when I say that, I don't mean it in like a birth is unpredictable, scary way.
Right.
But it is unpredictable. We can't know how that story is going to unfold until we're holding the baby, right?
Absolutely.
So we have to be open to your baby needing a different type of safe passage than the one you may have imagined. So when plans change, all is not lost. What can we do together as the doula and the client to best prepare for that?
Right.
So I like to say, like, first, when there's a change happening, just let's breathe, let go. Take a minute to take in the change, and then we can gather more information and make the best decisions. If you can refocus your goals, I feel like the doula can really absolutely help you slow down in this process. And then you can be more deliberate so that you don't feel things are spiraling out of control.
I like that, deliberate. That's good. That's really good. This is why I want to have a life doula. You're amazing.
Right, me too.
Everything you're saying, I'm like, I'll take that for 3 hours every day. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's true. Birth is humbling. It's a very big reminder that we are not in control of how everything in life unfolds, that we can make all the plans we want, but there's other variables surrounding us. And I always say that when you're planning this birth experience, you're not the only one that has a say in how this is going to happen, right? There's another little human or two, if you're having twins and so on, that has a say in how this is going to go. And that helped me when with my 6, I was planning a home birth with midwives. And at 43 weeks, I had a cesarean with my wonderful OB because I didn't have a say in my baby choosing not to come out at 43 weeks and, other things. So it is humbling in that way. But the great thing is when we have the right support around us, like a doula who is there to help you when you're changing course as the driver to help support you in doing that. So like you said, you don't feel out of control when it happens. And it's great.
Right. I mean, there are definitely unforeseen medical reasons that come up that even maybe an induction is going to have to happen in order for you and the baby to be safe. Certainly, I think you hear lots of doulas talking about induction happening too often, right? But there are real reasons why we need to induce someone to have the baby sooner rather than later. And so then I think there's really time when that happens to go to your doula and talk and mourn the loss of kind of your ideal, if that wasn't your ideal, and then really talk through, okay, what is that going to look like? The preparation that I think doulas can offer families is just so meaningful. It offers so much support and a way to process information that then really does reel it all in. It's able to let you take that deep breath, center yourself again. If you have a partner, you guys can get back on track together and kind of roll with the punches a little bit better. It really is the support that I wish every single person had. And unfortunately, I think too many of us are either without family in the area or friends in the area. And so the doula really can bring you back to that place.
That's wonderful, because how many of us are supporting our partners, our spouses, our other children, if we have other children, friends, family, work, and to have somebody to walk side by side with you through this process to remind you of your power that you already have, and to remind you that it's going to be okay and that you still have options and that you will still be supported throughout even changes. I mean, that's incredible in itself to have that, because we're giving that all the time to everyone else around us. So it's okay and even necessary for us to receive that same support and love from our doula when we're going through the pregnancy and birth and postpartum experience.
Absolutely. I think it's okay to have complicated feelings around your birth too. I think often we're like pushing that away. And, you know, when you think back on your birth, it's okay to hold sacred some amazing memories and to remember some parts you wish with all your heart you could have maybe done differently or could have gone differently.
Yeah, it's okay to just hold.
To have this like clear narrative. I think leaving open this room for something to step forward and to explore that and to keep unfolding that story is a way to be more authentic. And the doula can help process that with you and with your family.
I love that.
Birth is humbling.
Yeah, it is humbling. It absolutely is. And you mentioned being, induced, how, sometimes that's medically necessary. And it's not a matter of every intervention being bad. It's a matter of using the interventions when either wanted by the birthing person or necessary for the safety of mom and baby. And this kind of takes us into your number 3, which is that birth is political, whether we do or want to recognize it as such or not. And so if you would expand on that.
Yeah. So who you are and what body you live in can absolutely influence your birth. It can impact your choices. It can impact your care. It can certainly impact the outcomes. I think the most obvious is racial disparities in birth outcomes in this country is criminal. It's something that the New York Times just published an article on about 2 weeks ago. Black birthing people have higher death rates for themselves and their babies. And even after controlling for income level, insurance access, health, etc., just being not Black in this country means you have a higher chance of surviving birth and having a living baby.
It's unbelievable.
So being white and giving birth means that there are challenges that you'll be facing. Your white privilege follows you into your birth.
Right.
There is no way around that. And it doesn't mean we're not working to increase choice or access for everyone. There are so many parts of the U.S. where choice is severely limited, and that's for many different reasons.
Right. Well, I think just being a woman, number one, puts us at a disadvantage because we aren't heard or taken seriously already being women in our culture, in our world. And then you add on other things like even your age, maternal age, your weight. And then you add other things like previous cesareans and all these other things. And then you add on being a person of color, and where does that leave you in our culture, and especially when it comes to birthing, and not in a really good place. And you guys have been really bringing awareness to this in your platforms and into your conference that's coming up, Born Into This, correct?
Yeah. So at DTI, we believe that this should be an integral part of doula trainings. I actually think it's unethical to train doulas and have a doula leave a training and not really understand birth disparities going on in this country. A doula training is not just about hip squeezes and comfort measures, but advocacy is really what doulas do. And some doula trainings really shy away from that. They prefer that the doula is the quiet person in the room, the fly on the wall. When I trained 18 years ago was what I was told. And that this cannot happen. Okay. There's too much is going on, and we need to stand up for people who deserve a safe birth. It's a human rights issue. And so DTI does take a much stronger stance on this. I don't believe advocacy is a dirty word. It also doesn't mean creating a scene in a birth room. That doesn't help anyone. But there are really smart ways of slowing down, creating a team, talking with the professionals in the room about what you are witnessing, and acting with discernment on behalf of your client and helping them understand their rights, as well as what informed consent is. Again, like I said in the beginning, like this is a consumer who has rights. The power needs to go back to that person and that family. So the more autonomy, the more power we can put back in the birthing person, I believe we'll get to see the best outcomes possible.
Right. And a doula who is thoroughly trained and educated or surrounding the political issues with birth and human rights, women's rights, and the rights of people of color, they're going to be able to recognize much sooner if there's shameful care happening, if there's disrespectful care happening, because I think that it's so ingrained in the way we talk to each other, treat each other, and, the care provider and patient relationship that probably just gets looked over. And so to have somebody who can recognize when these things are happening on your team would be so beneficial and supportive to say, hey, wait a second, this is a problem. And, like you said, you don't have to make a big scene, but having the conversation is okay. You mentioned other trainings, shying away from it. I think people are just scared of it. And we need to face head on what we're scared of. Otherwise, it's never going to change. And DTI is one of the first, and way more trainings and you're familiar with all this on a much bigger level than I am, but it's the first trainings that I've seen to not only just take this head on in such a respectful, educated, informed manner, but also down to your trainings having gender neutral artwork and language. I've just been blown away by what I've been seeing you guys doing.
Yeah, I think it is really first and foremost our mission to put reproductive justice and social justice at the forefront of our training. It kind of is the skeleton where we start, and we're intentional about language because language is very powerful.
Absolutely.
And we are in a crisis right now with Black and brown babies dying at a rate that there's absolutely no excuse for. And so if you're working within a field where injustices are all around you, I think it's unethical. I don't know how you can go out in the world and work in the field and not really work every single day to make change. And they can be small or big depending on what your mission that day is and what you're capable of that day, but certainly have a voice in it.
That's a good point. I like that you mentioned that. We all have different gifts and talents, and we can all make change in our own way, but it's a matter of being aware of it and making change in your way instead of shying away from it. I think that's really important. I'm really glad that you brought this up and that you included it in the top 5 things that your doula wants you to know, because it's a very important conversation that we need to keep having. And it's okay for us to not know everything and to keep learning, as we go, as long as we are continuing to be part of that change. So,
absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons we launched the Born Into This conference for this summer in July. And it really is to get people together to talk about it, the good and the bad and the ugly, and have conversations across different platforms, whether you're in tech, whether you're in nonprofit, whether you're in for-profit, whether you're a product-based business. Let's come together and talk about the issues at hand, learn from each other, and then come up with actionables to start to make change. And that's going to look different for everybody, but most of us are working towards the same mission. And so I feel like put down your phone and get in a room and let's discuss it. The time is now.
I love that.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that so much. I have a big smile on my face. So that's amazing. Okay, so tell everyone what number 4 is.
Okay. So this one we cannot forget. It's so important to prep and plan for birth, yes, but arguably even more important to prep and plan for postpartum.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so there's 2 different sides to this, right? As a doula, I can say that being at someone's birth is probably one of the most amazing experiences of your life, and doulas get to do it over and over and over again, and the energy is amazing. It's sexy. It's all the energy wrapped up in one that you hope for, like on the best day, right?
Yes, all the oxytocin.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Yes.
But it's a time that is going to end,
Yes.
even if it's a long labor. You know, you might be there for 3 days, but it is going to come to an end. A baby is going to be born, hopefully, right? And then that parent has to go home with the baby or continue on with the baby. And there's a lot more to learn over those first like 3, 4, 5 months postpartum.
Yes.
And I do, when I use the word postpartum, I want to be intentional to point out that postpartum is a period of time that we refer to from 0 to 3 months typically. It's not postpartum depression. I think sometimes there's some confusion around that.
Yeah, people interchange those like, oh, I had postpartum, and they're referring to postpartum depression. It's like, well, we all have postpartum. That's a period of time. And I'm just going to add to that before you continue on that for me, I feel my postpartum periods last between anywhere from 3 to 18 months, or when I wean my babies. That's my personal experience and thought on that. So yes, postpartum and postpartum depression are two very different things.
Right. So I just want to remind us all, and I even have to remind myself of it, because when I'm teaching a doula training, I absolutely love talking about birth. I could talk about birth forever, but I also love that postpartum time. And there are postpartum doulas. So some doulas are both, some doulas are one or the other. And as a parent, I think having a doula that can bridge, right, from one to the other, which DTI trains our doulas in both birth and postpartum, that can work with you prenatally and talk to you about that postpartum period. What is that going to be like? How can you best prepare? What are your fears? Let's break this down. We really can't forget about those moments with baby in those first couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think after I had my 5th, which I had him like the first year I started birth without fear. So I was really removed for that for a while because we thought we were done having children. And then when I was pregnant with our 6th, known as beard baby, I was planning for postpartum because my 5th was very difficult. And so when I was doing that preparation and preparing for postpartum emotionally, physically, mentally, support wise, I realized that we weren't having this discussion as much, that we do all this preparation for birth, which when you get down to it, birth is an event. It's a very, very important event in your life, but then it's like you said, it's done. Postpartum begins the rest of your life as a parent. And the amount of preparation and planning and support that we're receiving or making happen or, being given and the conversation around postpartum is lacking severely in our culture. And especially in the US, the US is not set up to be family supportive. It just isn't. And, you'll find yourself being very alone. And it's not surprising that our numbers of postpartum depression are so high and things like that. I know there's a lot of factors including that. That's a whole other podcast probably, but we're not preparing for something so important, and other people don't know how to support us in it because the conversation isn't happening. So it is incredibly important. I do think, like you said earlier, you touched on how birth really can be the beginning of our journey as parents, right? Like we're going to take how we were treated and whether or not we felt we were the driver in our birth experience, we're going to take that into parenthood with us. But then also beyond that, when you're writing that birth plan, are you also writing that postpartum plan? Right?
Absolutely. I mean, it can be so isolating. It can be challenging in ways really you can't even anticipate until you meet your baby, until you learn how to breastfeed if you're breastfeeding, learn what that baby needs in the middle of the night, and how, if it's your first baby, you might not know what it's like to not sleep for weeks and weeks or years at a time.
Yeah, definitely. That is the reality.
And I have 3 children, and I know that for myself personally, each one had its own challenges.
Yes.
So trying to talk with a postpartum doula and try to come up with the best possible plan of support beforehand can make a world of difference. January, I'd love to know, like, in your last birth, when you had beard baby, what was one thing that was super helpful during your postpartum time that someone actually helped you with?
Oh my gosh, I hired a postpartum doula the first week.
Yay! Really?
I really did, actually.
It was not planned.
Yeah, I really did. So when I had her, we were actually sick. We weren't feeling well. And so we had 5 kids at home. Brandon was running back and forth because, we hadn't been planning a hospital birth, and everything was kind of chaos, of course, because of the change of plans. And then we got home and we're exhausted for obvious reasons. And then weren't feeling well. And I realized, how is Brandon going to support me by taking care of the 5 other children so I can take care and figure out breastfeeding and whatnot with the baby if he's sleep deprived? So I hired a postpartum doula for 3 or 4 nights just to come in and sit in my room with me, because don't sit in another room with my baby, right? Like sit in my room with me in my room so I could actually fall asleep and I could get caught up on rest. And then Brandon could go sleep in the other room and get a few nights of sleep and heal and rest. And then we're like, okay, now we can do this. But honestly, Tara, if we hadn't done that, I don't know what would have happened, because what do you do if you don't have family or, friends who are willing to do that for you, or who can't because of whatever's going on in their lives? So we hired a postpartum doula, and after like the 3rd or 4th night, I was like, this is addicting. Like, I don't know. I just want to keep her forever, because even after my 6th baby, I felt nervous about being alone at night with my baby, because you are worried about their breathing and all those little things. And so having a postpartum doula, I did that after 2 babies, and it was a wonderful experience. And I tell people, talk to doulas, like they're willing to work with you and to, support you, because it makes all the difference in this world, in my opinion. So you're preaching to the choir right now. I love it.
That nighttime space can feel so scary for a lot of us.
Lonely too.
Really lonely. Yeah. And actually this brings up something for me when I'm looking 18 years ago when I was trained. We were actually trained not to help families in the middle of the night. And that's something that has evolved greatly in the doula community since then. And that DTI stands by, because I knew right away after only working with 5 or 6 families that, everyone needed more support at night. It wasn't like this thing you had to go through on your own, and then the doula shows up in the morning and tries to put everything back together, because the emotions can be so raw. Your hormones are up and down and all around, as they should be. That is kind of, the waves that come in and out after you give birth, and in whatever way you give birth with a new baby. It's like that. And to have that quiet and that space, for most of us, it feels lonely. And so postpartum doulas can be really flexible. They can work in the middle of the night. They can work during the day. They can work one way one week, and then you can change it up the next, because as you change and the baby changes, so do your needs.
Right.
And that's what I love about the role. I think one takeaway for people listening is that there is no one way to doula someone. It's really like what you're needing in that moment, and the doula is going to be flexible to do their best to fulfill that need.
Oh, I love that. That is good. That is really good. There's no one way. I love that. The variations are normal, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the postpartum period and support is just so vitally important, and if you have the friends and family around you, what is maybe 1 or 2 things you would tell people to do to get the correct support, or I don't know if correct's the right word, but to get the right support for them in the postpartum period from those around them that love them and want to help them, but don't know how, maybe?
Right. So the first thing that comes up when you say that is understanding boundaries and whether you actually have them with your family and friends or not, because well-intentioned people sometimes will drive you batshit crazy. Can I curse?
No, it's so true.
And, maybe it's your mother-in-law who doesn't know what breastfeeding is like and isn't really supportive. Or maybe it's your mother who breastfed you and you're choosing to bottle feed. Or maybe it's a circumcision thing that's coming up with someone in the family, wants you to or doesn't want you to.
Right.
Maybe it's just like that person's getting to hold the baby more. All of this noise, I like to call it, comes in. And that is like the opposite of what most of us are wanting, even those of us who have grown up in like chaotic families.
Right.
You just kind of want some space and time to figure out, like, who are you as this parent? Who is this baby? How the hell am I going to shower? Because it's been 3 days, by the way, and I can't even sit with myself anymore. Right. Anyone feeding the rest of the family? So I would first think about, what are the boundaries? If you have a partner, come together with your partner and come up with a plan to kind of set some boundaries beforehand. I've had clients who have written really loving letters to folks that want to come and visit and just saying, we want to take 48 hours or 10 days or however long that feels right to that family to be alone with each other, to just be a family. Please bring food and drop it off, but don't stay.
Yeah.
Maybe your best friend who like understands more of the dynamics in the family, can call grandma or the mother-in-law and be like, can you come over on Tuesday and bring some dinner? They're going to be settling in the bedroom and they probably won't be awake when you come by, but could you just drop it off? Like tell the best friend to do that. Have someone else do the dirty work.
Yeah, definitely.
And set stuff up. Because I just think people love you so much, but they can't really understand what you're feeling at every moment, and it's going to change. So if you can really think about those boundaries and how to implement at least some of them, you're going to get to a place in parenting where you want to be a little bit faster.
Right. It's almost like you have to hold the chatter and noise at bay so that you can have some quiet to listen to your own instincts kick in as a new parent. Right? Because you have them. They're there. And that's what doulas are great at doing, is they come in to your space and they treat it sacred and they honor it and they support you in listening to and finding your own parental instincts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the core pieces of being a postpartum doula is you're always working yourself out of the family. You never want the family to be dependent on you. You're there to build confidence, to educate, to mentor, to have discussions and to help. But at the end of the day, if a year later the family feels like they can't go on without you, then you really haven't done your job. It's more about how can we get this family to a place where they're the best parents that they want to be, in whatever definition that is. No one else can decide that but you, and your doula is there to understand and kind of help you map that out. How are you going to get there?
I love that. That is wonderful. And I just want to say real quick before we go into number 5 is that if anyone is listening and you're like, well, must be nice because I don't have family and I don't have friends and I don't have support and I don't have the money for the doula, I will tell you this. Just give yourself grace through this period. Give yourself a lot of grace. Be okay with changing your expectations of yourself and your family and your partner, and just just a lot of grace. When we had our 5th, we had been homeless during that pregnancy, and when I was pregnant, I had to really give myself a lot of grace that it was okay for my other children to watch PBS all morning, things like that, because I didn't have any support around me. I didn't have any help around me. And when you find yourself in a situation where you're just scared that you won't have enough money to feed your family, or that you won't have money to make rent that week in the extended stay hotel you're living in, you need to give yourself a lot of space and grace to survive and to do your best. And there are many women and families that find themselves without a lot of support, and either they don't know where to turn for more support, or they don't think they can ask a doula to work with them financially, or whatnot. And if you find yourself in that situation, it's okay to just sit there with your baby, and just be and bond and figure out feeding or whatever it is. I don't know. What do you have to add to that? Like if there's somebody finding themselves in a situation like that?
Well, I would also say that most doulas do some kind of discounted or pro bono work.
Yes.
All of us at our trainings, we talk a lot about how to manage this without sabotaging, your own family, because all of us are doing this as a career. But there are plenty of foundations set up that can pay doulas for people who can't afford a doula. Ask the doulas in your community, or email a bunch of doulas in your community. They'll definitely know someone or a program near you where a doula can come on a sliding scale, or even at no cost to you. That said, if you can afford a doula, pay your doula well, because that's the only way we can also continue to offer services to people who need them, right? But ask. That's like a lesson I'm learning in everything, like as a mother, as a business owner, as a doula, as anything. It's like, ask for what you need. And people most of the time really want to help. So ask.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I knew that you would be able to share a little bit more about that, being in the profession yourself on how that works. I know that there are doulas that do that, work on a sliding scale or take on clients pro bono. So that's great to hear that that is the case. Like you said, this is a profession. You have your own family to take care of as well, but you didn't get into this work to not support someone who really needs it. So,
right.
You know, and that's what I try to remind people is like the doulas are there because they want to support you. They want to help you. So you can definitely find a way. I like that you mentioned emailing because I think sometimes some people are so afraid of the responses they're going to get or are afraid of being, you know, or feeling shame. And so sending out a bunch of emails, it's asking for help without making yourself maybe feel too vulnerable. So what is the fifth thing that your doula wants you to know?
So the fifth thing that every doula wants their client to know is that you are amazing. Aww. And this is not BS.
Right.
You really are the best at being there for you and cheering you on no matter what. So there are few things in this world more incredible to witness than you doing the work of being a parent, of giving birth to your baby. And I can't even tell you how many times I've been privileged to sit with someone in labor or with someone on their couch as they're holding their baby for the first time. And as you look at them, that is the most beautiful person you have ever seen.
Oh, I love
it.
That.
Really is. It takes your breath away every single time. And so whether you're in a vulnerable moment in front of your doula, giving birth in front of your doula, crying because things didn't go the way you thought it would the night before, your doula thinks you're amazing through it all.
Oh, I love that. It's like a doula can see a human being for just who they really are and what they really are feeling and experiencing and just seeing the good in them. And that's beautiful. I love that. I know we mentioned the Born Into This conference is coming up in Austin, right? In July?
Yeah. So the conference that I mentioned earlier is open to everyone. Anyone who wants to talk about birth and parenting and change making. We're really also excited that we have leaders of many different fields coming and artists coming, all for the same mission of creating change for these birth disparities we discussed, for autonomy in birth and parenting, and to really come together and get some answers to questions we're all having. So anyone that's interested in come, you're all welcome. You can find out more about the conference at bornintothis.co, and that's happening July 12th and 13th in Austin, Texas.
Do you and Gina talk about the ripple effect that this is going to have? I mean, how powerful, because everyone that attends this and goes back to whatever their profession is or their talents is or their platform is, starts to make changes, there's going to be a ripple effect in that. And it's going to be, I don't even think that it's going to be as tangible as we might want it to be, because it's going to be that powerful and that big. So I just want to acknowledge that what you guys are doing is going to have a ripple effect that we can't even put a lid on, which is phenomenal. So thank you for doing that. That's amazing.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Our mission in such a big way.
Yeah, it's incredible. I see it. And I'm sorry, you were going to say, what else were you going to share?
I was also just going to say that I hope everyone that listens that's thinking about a doula will go get their doula on, whether that means hiring a doula or becoming friends with a doula or becoming a doula themselves. A lot of my clients actually over the years are now doulas.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you happen to get the doula bug yourself, definitely check this out. Our website is wearedti.com, and we have online trainings and in-person trainings. We're global, so you could do it in person in the US or online across the world. And if you wanted to become a childbirth educator, we also train childbirth educators.
I love it. And for any of you that are listening that are not interested in being an educator or any of that, but you're interested in needing a doula, I think that you can feel confident in looking up DTI doulas. Do you guys have a listing of your doulas somewhere that people can look up?
We do. So on our website, wearedti.com, there is a listing of doulas, and you can also always email us, hello@wearedti.com for help in finding a doula or any other questions that you have.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me from Spain.
Thank you.
This has been amazing, and I've learned some new things today, and I just really appreciate you and everything that you guys are doing. So
thank you so much, January.
You're welcome.
And back at you.
Thank you. All right, you guys, until next time, we love you.
Bye-bye.